Let's get the thoughts of Susie Boniface and Kwasi Kwarteng. Kwasi, if I can start with you.
Yeah.
A week into the war, more or less, you just heard what the president has been saying. What are your thoughts?
So I was very struck by the fact that the press secretary said that it would be over within between 4 and 6 weeks. I mean, that's a very precise time frame, and that's essentially saying by the end of April, if we're on, March the 6th today, she's saying by the end of April it will be done. Now, my experience as an MP, if we look at Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, all of these campaigns took years. And my worry is that if the mullahs dig in, this whole thing could be much longer protracted than the president and his press secretary think. The other thing I would say is, if you look at the recent history, the Iranians fought an 8-year war, I think it was 8 years, 7 years, against Saddam Hussein. They lost about 1 million casualties. So, and that was in the 80s. It wasn't, all that long ago. So I think that they're underestimating the willingness of the regime, horrible regime though it is, to really dig in and fight. That's my fear. They may be right. There may be a revolution in Tehran next week. Who knows? But my fear is that this whole thing could be much longer lasting than we think.
Yeah, and Susie, we heard from the Iranian regime almost daring the US to start a ground invasion.
Yeah, there's some stuff in the papers today talking about the fact that they seem to have cancelled a big event for paratroopers in the US, which has caused some speculation that they could end up with some boots on the ground. Israel has been talking about moving ground troops into Lebanon, which would, mean that there was something happening on the western flank. And the idea that Trump has floated today that it's unconditional surrender and we need to have a say in who the next Ayatollah in Iran is completely bonkers, because, as Kwasi was pointing out, the people who are running Iran at the moment in this regime, they are not like Maduro in Venezuela. They're not like the regime in Cuba or anywhere else. They're not just dictators or tyrants or bad guys or someone who got elected and then stayed there. The Ayatollah is the supreme leader. It's the equivalent of to Shia of of the Pope. Selecting the next one is like a process of conclave, and they genuinely do not really care too much if they die, because they believe they're doing God's work, and that the best ending is apocalypse for them, because then they get raptured and all the infidel get burned. And so the virgins are all awaiting this lovely
I wouldn't over-egg that.
No, they also want the money.
They want power, they want money, and also, if you're a mullah and you've been in power for 35 years or 20, whatever, for a long time, and America doing what they're doing, what alternative have you got? I mean, where are you going to flee to? You're going to go to North Korea?
There's nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go.
There's no safety. And there's also the Republican Guard there there are 150,000 of them. So you can take out the Ayatollah, you can take out the top 10 levels if you want of that regime. But the fact is that every single person in Iran still lives in the same place as the secret police, who do disappearances, who murder their family and everything else, and charge money to get the body back and all the rest of it. And inside Iran, it's not like it's one amorphous blob of people who all just want freedom or who all just love the Ayatollah. There are the Kurds, there's the Azeris, there's the Baluchis, there's ethnic groups, all of whom, if there is no leadership, will go, well, we'd like to have our say, and they're going to start fighting each other.
Yeah,
so you end up with a huge sectarian war in the middle of the Middle.
That's a potential outcome, where you have all these different groups fighting each other. And you're quite right to say, these people, 150,000 IRGC, they're not just going to, say, President Trump, we're going to surrender. As you say, they want to be martyrs, some of them. Some of them want to stay in power. The Revolutionary Guard controls a lot of the economy. They've got a lot to lose. And I think they're going to dig in.
What about the risk of the war, which we're seeing already just escalating? When we're seeing the attacks on the Gulf states, we're seeing, obviously the increasing violence between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon as well.
So I don't think, maybe I'm being a bit complacent here, but I don't think that Iran's ability to extend power is all that great. Dubai, Bahrain, all these places are quite near Iran, and thankfully, there have been very few casualties. And a lot of the drones, I know people who are living in Qatar and other places, they're being shot out of the sky. So I'm not sure how their ability to fight externally is. They will try and promote terror groups, and they will have sort of asymmetric type warfare. But I don't think that, I'm not that concerned about their
That's
hardware.
what they're very good at. And we're seeing elsewhere today the arrest of suspects in London in a Iranian-sponsored alleged...
That's right. I think that's what they'll do.
Attacks. They've got these proxies everywhere, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it is lone wolves.
Sure.
And we're seeing as well, it was reported in the Telegraph tonight, that apparently Moscow has been providing them with some targeting information from its much more superior set of satellites. And although, taking out the regime in Tehran means that all the regional commanders who are firing these missiles randomly off at various people, they don't have anyone telling them what to do. Yeah. They're kind of acting autonomously. And
that's effectively because the government's been, I hate to use
but if Moscow is still able to get targeting information to them, then effectively it's Vladimir Putin that is firing these weapons around. Sure. And he's obviously got these issues in Ukraine, isn't very happy with Ukraine, with America funding the proxy war against him.
The issue here is the fact that I think there'll be a stalemate. I don't think, God, touch wood, that Iran is going to be necessarily very effective having an offensive campaign, although they can disrupt and have terror. But my worry is that I don't think America either is going to be able to effect regime change. So you'll be in this sort of standoff, this stalemate.
Interestingly, the White House announced on their social media what their objectives actually are, and one of them is to ensure that the proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world. So that's one of the 4 objectives that they listed. James, let me go back to you in Washington. I mean, now the timeline seems to be 4 to 6 weeks. Heaven knows where we'll be in 6 weeks from now. Is this costing President Trump much support, especially within his base?
It appears to be, Barbara. Yeah, I mean, Susie and Kwasi, they're fleshing out some of the complications in all of this. Donald Trump, he speaks about Venezuela, holds that up as the best-in-class method of regime change, which, of course, it was. Surgical strike, possibly an inside job, but Trump certainly sees that as the example to follow. His difficulty, of course, is that in Iran, that is a regime built on ideology in a way that Venezuela very much is not. He has Delcy Rodriguez dancing to his tune in Venezuela. That's far from the case in Iran, of course. And it is impacting on his popularity. If you look at an average of the high-quality surveys in the States, 38% only of Americans approve of the action in Iran, 49% disapprove. So, there is a time pressure as Donald Trump faces the uncertainty, the chaos of war, and the distinct possibility it could all get worse. And of course, there are oil prices. The Dow Jones has taken a huge hit, the biggest hit, finished at its lowest since inauguration day. So in a midterm election year, the policy in Iran doesn't necessarily chime with Americans who voted Donald Trump back in on a ticket of bringing prices down, particularly at the petrol pumps, as much as anywhere else, and also a pledge not to get involved in foreign wars. So on both counts, he faces political jeopardy.
Yeah, he kept on talking about how many wars he'd ended, and now he seems to have started one. James Matthews in Washington. James, for the moment, thank you. Well, that story features on the front of The Guardian with the headline, Trump demands Iran's unconditional surrender. We're going to have a full rundown of what's in the rest of the papers at 10:30. But first, let's go to Lebanon. And Israel has launched its heaviest wave of strikes on the country in over a year, with more than 200 people said to have been killed there this week. There have been chaotic scenes on the streets as hundreds of thousands of people flee their homes following sweeping evacuation orders from the Israeli military. Our international correspondent John Sparks reports now from the streets of Beirut.
We're driving down the red line, the boundary that separates Beirut from its southern suburbs. That's a huge section of the city being subjected to wave upon wave of Israeli airstrikes. A Hezbollah member has offered to take us to a bomb site on the northern edge, but told us we'd have to be quick. Okay, we've been given 2 minutes. 2 minutes at the bomb sites within the red zone. We're on the red line now. We're crossing into the red zone. This area is served by the Israeli evacuation order. Okay, and there it is. That's a big site. There are other people on the road, but the Israelis have ordered everyone to keep out. Wow. looking at a series of 10-story buildings that have been struck. They would have had shops at the ground level. Some of them have come down, some of them are badly damaged. There is a smell here, an acrid smell, metallic smell. The damage is extensive. On this side, it's a bit of an urban souk, really. Mobile phone shops, restaurants, clothing, shoe shops, that sort of thing, completely damaged. Sam, let's turn around. Let's have a look down here. Shops, cloaked in a thick layer of dust. Okay. Okay, we've got to go. See the damaged cars on the side. It's a tow truck here, but he's got a lot of vehicles to remove. We're in a position of relative safety here, but we need to be quick. We can hear a drone up above us. Why were we allowed to go and do that, to film that site? I think Hezbollah want us to see that that was a market area, the sort of place they say that people go and do their shopping, their everyday business, not a Hezbollah command center, not a weapons storage facility. That's why we were allowed to go and see that, although we didn't. What we weren't allowed to do was leave. We were stopped by a new group from Hezbollah. They began to question us when we heard a loud explosion nearby. There's been another strike nearby, a loud, some sort of airstrike by the Israelis. Well, we can't move at the moment. We don't want to use our cameras either.
This is a warning strike. It's not a major strike. Do not film. They might fire in the sky now, so do not work.
Okay. No, it's not a
We sped away to the relative safety of the city centre. But it was unclear, at least initially, whether the Israelis had hit a target nearby. Okay, we're out now. We've left that area, and this is what we think happened. We think the Israelis used an airburst, a warning signal, a loud explosion, telling people to get out of the area. We were boxed in at that moment by Hezbollah. We did get out, and then about 10 minutes later, they hit a building nearby with an airstrike. And we've seen images on social media of that. I think it just goes to show how dangerous it is. We were not in the red zone, we were on the line. It just goes to show how dangerous it is there. And we're talking about a huge section of the city under threat of airstrikes.
The situation there in Lebanon. Well, meanwhile, an insider at the British Foreign Office has told Sky News that the UK's ambassador to Israel sent warnings back to London about the United States and Israel planning to launch an attack on Iran weeks in advance. And he says he was surprised by the UK's response. He was speaking to our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes.
The main job that the Foreign Office has is safeguarding our national security more broadly. So, I would ask at the moment, why we ministers appear to be so caught off guard by this whole Iran crisis, for example. We have an excellent ambassador in Tel Aviv, Simon Walters. He's very well plugged into the Israeli system. He was following Israeli intentions vis-à-vis Iran for weeks. And it was highly likely that the Israelis and the Americans were going to strike Iran. He was aware of that. He was having those conversations. He was reporting those conversations back to London.
And what response was he getting?
Well, he was reporting those things back. He was doing his job. Clearly, officials can do some things, but ultimately ministers need to make the really big judgment calls around, for example, deploying military assets. And clearly we didn't do that. We could have done a lot more. But ministers seem to have either been caught off guard or actively didn't want to take those steps because they, as I say, they're beholden in many ways to a very rigid interpretation of international law.
The government did move Typhoon jets to Qatar back in January. And they did bolster their F-35 presence in Cyprus and forward deploy hundreds of troops. So I don't see how you can say that they didn't heed the warnings when they clearly did do something, just not enough.
Well, I think that's right, Deborah. They didn't do enough. I mean, this ship, HMS Dragon, I think is going to arrive in theatre 2 weeks after it's needed, for example, right? And there's a whole array of explanations for that, but clearly something went wrong.
Doesn't that more expose our lack of capability and preparedness for war?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think partly it was poor planning on the part of the government, but I think, yes, if you boil it down, what it really comes to is we haven't invested enough in our military capabilities. We've allowed them to be whittled down at precisely the moment that the world is in its most dangerous place in decades.
Were you surprised that a destroyer wasn't deployed sooner to help defend our sovereign bases in Cyprus?
I was surprised. And ultimately, that's with the Prime Minister, with the Foreign Secretary, and with the Attorney General. It's the politicians that make those really big calls. So I don't want to blame the officials for that decision, but I was surprised.
We've had a response to that interview from the UK government. This is what it says. As the Prime Minister outlined, the UK moved defensive assets to Cyprus and Qatar in January and February, including fighter jets, air defence missiles and advanced radar, to ensure that we were in a heightened state of readiness in advance of any conflict beginning. Those jets were immediately put into the sky when strikes began, and we are reinforcing our military presence in Cyprus. This government's priority remains the safety of British nationals in the region and reaching a negotiated settlement on Iran. Well, joining us in the studio is our chief political correspondent, John Craig. John, what have you made of this claim that actually the government did have, was effectively told that this attack might start weeks ago?
Well, the former Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, said in a rather colourful phrase today that the British government was caught with their pants down. Now, plenty of politicians, opposition politicians, of course, have raised these criticisms, but to hear it from a Foreign Office whistleblower is particularly damaging from the government. And this claim that the government was not ready and didn't act quickly enough to prepare for this war is going to be made big time by Kemi Badenoch tomorrow. She is speaking at the Conservative Spring Conference up in Harrogate, and that ship that the whistleblower was mentioning there, she mentioned in her speech, this is the HMS... Sorry?
HMS Dragon?
Dragon, yes. HMS Dragon. She talks about how the US, Greece and France have all sent ships. Ours is stuck in Portsmouth Harbour. She's saying that today's Labour Party is nothing like the patriotic Labour Party of yesteryear, and they're playing student politics. So in her speech, Kemi Badenoch is going to say, I never thought I would see the day when Britain's allies felt they could not rely on us. This week, they've described us as weak. And she goes on to talk about they've accused us of deserting them, going missing in action. She accuses the Prime Minister of sitting on the fence, playing student politics. When she says that the Labour Party is nothing like the patriotic Labour Party of yesteryear, she quotes Nye Bevan. You won't remember Nye Bevan. He was even before my time. 1957 Labour Conference, Brighton. She says, Nye Bevan warned about Britain not having a nuclear deterrent. He described it as the UK being sent naked into the conference chamber. Famous Nye Bevan quote. Well, today it's happening again. Now, one development we've also seen tonight at Fairford, this is a huge air base in Gloucestershire. It's some enormous great bomber, possibly even more than one arriving. And, of course, why Fairford? Well, Fairford, of course, is this enormous base. It's got a 2-mile runway. It was built, I looked this up, I have to confess, 1944 to transport troops to the D-Day landings. And it's where the B-52s left to bomb in the Iraq War in 2003. So those planes have started to arrive at Fairford. Meanwhile, the government is pointing out that helicopters have begun arriving in Cyprus. Typhoon aircraft have arrived in Qatar, and UK and Typhoon aircraft have arrived in the Eastern Mediterranean. I should mention, actually, that Al Carnes, who is the Armed Forces Minister, has hit back at Kemi Badenoch already. He says trying to score cheap political points off the back of a serious security situation is deeply irresponsible. This situation is above politics and requires calm, collective decision-making, not hyperbole and sound bites. I think the really embarrassing thing is that ship stuck in Portsmouth harbour. I mean...
Because they don't really have an idea of when it's going to...
No, today, at the number 10 briefing for political correspondence, they still don't know when it's going to leave. I mean...
yeah.
Carry on up the Navy, or...
I guess, Kwasi, if I can just start with you, going back to that comment about Kemi Badenoch. Is it political point scoring?
No, I think it's a fair point that she's making. And the diplomat earlier, I think he's called Mr. Kateka,
yeah.
He's left the Foreign Office. He made a very good point. He said, it's not the officials, it's the political leaders, the ministers who have to decide. And I think what's happened, I've followed the story very closely, is that obviously we had that by-election last week. The Prime Minister has a very fragile coalition of the left. He knows what happened to Tony Blair when he went gung-ho behind Bush in Iraq 20 years ago. And so he's paused and taken his time to decide whether to go in with Trump. And that's what's causing the delays. These are political judgments that he's making that are delaying our response. And that's why, and I think it's completely fair for Kemi Badenoch to point that out and say there were patriotic Labour people who understood defence and wanted the nuclear deterrent, and today's leaders are playing student politics. You may disagree with her, but I think it's a fair point that she's made.
But she would make exactly the same point. If he had said, OK, fine, let's get all our kit in place, because it takes months to get some of this stuff lined up and get the logistics in place. So let's start sending this stuff here now. Let's all be part of building up the war effort. Kemi Badenoch would be quite rightly saying now as well, well, hang on, you're making the same mistakes as Tony Blair going gung-ho behind some messy war in the Middle East.
No,
well, some people would be.
They would have been
He couldn't win, no matter what he would do.
But that's the nature of politics.
I suspect that what's happened here is that whether he received a briefing about what the diplomat there was talking about the build-up and the likelihood of an attack, I think when he did start to hear about it, Starmer seems to have decided, well, we're not going to be part of this. I don't think it's legal. Maybe I don't want to be doing the same thing as Tony Blair, but whatever, he's made that decision. And the problem, and that would have been fine, he wouldn't have needed to move the ship there, because all the assets that were sent, the radar, those jets, they are defensive assets, right? They're not going to take part in anything, they're just there to protect our guys. And what's happened is he's changed his mind.
That's right. He's done a U-turn again.
So he's done a U-turn.
That's the issue.
Because Trump's got a problem. He can't get his B-1s over to Iran unless he's got Fairford and it's two-mile runway in which the only place those things can land.
And that was the initial frustration of President Trump was that Keir Starmer wouldn't let him use the air.
So he's given in to Trump to help him.
And now he's done a U-turn.
And now he's in a sticky situation because now suddenly it is the war we are unwillingly involved in, and he's got to find a way to have some offensive assets as well.
We've just had some breaking news coming in from Lebanon, from the UN forces there, saying that amidst the heavy firing this evening, 3 peacekeepers have been injured inside their base in Al-Kawaza in southwestern Lebanon. So coming in from UN forces in Lebanon, 3 peacekeepers there injured. And going back to your point there, Susie, that you were just making, I mean, this is just escalating. And the point is that Keir Starmer may have flip-flopped at the start, but now is it possible for him to maintain the position he has now?
No, because events, dear boy, events. Something will happen in which he is forced to say, well, now, hang on, we do have to take the sword out of the scabbard, and off we pop. And the one thing that's in the favour of this situation at the moment is that the papers are reporting tonight China is so far not being involved with anything. If China was to start weighing in, and they have supplied Iran with ballistic missiles before now, which have been depleted in this assault. If China were to start weighing in, start rearming, then we're looking at a very serious situation with multiple powers.
I think they'll be very reluctant to do that.
They'd be very reluctant. I think they'd have some responsibility about it. But,
and also, they hate unintended consequences.
Yeah. But we do have Putin getting involved and offering some targeting information, being mischievous. I think all he'll want to do is be mischievous because he's busy in Ukraine. But he does have a massive war-based, militarised economy which depends upon finding a thing to go and have a war with. So it would suit him.
For China, the main...
Except that Russia's stretched already in Ukraine.
That's right. I think for China, the main thing will be the oil, because Iran supplies, I think, 25% of Chinese oil, and that's the thing that they'll be focused on. I don't think they want to get involved even in a proxy war with the US, given Trump's unpredictability.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there for now, but coming up next, we're going to take a first look at what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Of course, the situation in Iran all over them, including a poll about what UK voters think about the UK possibly joining the war with Iran. Stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Welcome back. It's time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Well, US President Donald Trump's demand for Iran's unconditional surrender makes the front page of The Guardian. That story summed up in a three-word headline by The Times: "Surrender warns Trump." Meanwhile, The Telegraph reports on how Russia is helping Iran strike US military targets in the Middle East. The Financial Times carries a warning from Qatar's energy minister, who says that the war in the Middle East could bring down the economies of the world, with the possibility of all Gulf energy exporters shutting production within days. A domestic angle on the front of the Eye, which says only 1 in 5 UK voters actually support Britain joining the war with Iran. Elsewhere, the Mail reports on the arrest of 4 men in London who were detained on suspicion of spying on the Jewish community for Iran. The Mirror leads on claims about Donald Trump in the Epstein files, which have been categorically denied by the White House. To the Express, which says the Queen wants children to put down their phones and pick up a book. Oasis legend Noel Gallagher has split from his girlfriend. That's according to The Sun. And The Star leads on the UK's 2026 Eurovision entry, which is called Eins, zwei, drei, which has a chorus partially sung in German. So maybe we'll get some votes from the German audience when it actually happens.
Only if we pronounce it right.
So let's look at this story on the front of the eye, which I think is crucial because it's got a poll. UK voters, what they're saying about joining the war with Iran. And here it says that 47% are opposed, 31% don't know, only 22% would actually be in favour. Susie, Kwasi, to both of you. Susie, if you can start. Are these numbers a surprise to you?
Not really. I think most people, when they see a war starting in the Middle East, or a land war anywhere, really, that's led, especially when it's led by a lunatic Monopoly board flipper painted orange, to generally want to stay clear of it. And they think that a Prime Minister who says, I'm not sure this is the right thing to do, is a welcome change to some of the Prime Ministers we've had who've said, yeah, it's marvellous stuff we've got. So I think this is one of those instances where Keir is doing something most people approve of, but politics and the newspapers, the newspaper editors in large part, for a mostly socially conservative press, are not approving of him. He's getting a huge pile-on in Parliament, from politicians, and in the media, and I think most people are fine with it.
The pile-on isn't about his position. The pile-on is about the fact that he started in, last week saying one thing, and he's now reversed.
Yeah, but last week you were piling on him for not going to war, and this week you're piling on him for not going to war well enough. And it's just
he didn't do it quickly enough. He was, whatever else you think about Trump, he is the president of the United States, and they've said openly that Keir Starmer hasn't been very supportive. So the special relationship in this context is under pressure in a way that I haven't seen ever. So, yes, the public now support him. I don't know what they'll do or say when we're forced or dragged into this conflict, but at the same time, we've damaged the relationship with our closest ally.
The special relationship was always special to us. It was never particularly special to America. And as it's shown, they're able to go and have a war without us.
What was very interesting, actually, when President Trump says unconditional surrender, for people like me who are interested in history, that's what we said in World War II. He's clearly cosplaying some kind of, Churchillian leader. That's what he's doing. And, that at that time, England, Britain, the UK, and the United States were as one. We were totally aligned.
No, we were on our own, and America picked up
and then
later.
They joined. You're right.
Wrong way round. It didn't want to be tucked in behind America.
No, we did. You're right. we stood alone. But then in 1943, they said unconditional surrender.
Yes, they came and joined our way of doing it.
And then he's clearly trying to channel that. And I think that's very interesting, given the fact that, whatever the order was, we were working together then. Now, it seems that the UK and the US are taking different paths, or have been, until Starmer did a U-turn essentially earlier this week.
It's interesting that obviously, according to UK voters, they don't want more involvement in the war. And there's a story here from page of the FT, which is incredibly worrying, from the Energy Minister of Qatar, who doesn't mince his words. He says that the war could bring down the economies of the world, that it could drive oil to $150 a barrel, because basically the whole gas and oil production could be shut down, or it could take Qatar weeks to months to go back to the levels that they were producing before, which, of course, would have huge impact around the world, especially here in the UK.
Yeah, it'll have a global impact. I think the first victim, actually, will be President Trump in the midterms, because his whole shtick, his whole premise of getting elected was he was going to bring down the cost of living, bring down inflation. And if oil prices go up to $150 a barrel, inflation is going to go up, 100%. So he will be a victim. I think the British government here, with the cost of living being an issue, will be under huge pressure. They're polling at, 19%, 20% already. God knows what will happen if inflation goes up beyond 5, 6%, double-digit inflation. So the minister has put it very boldly, but he's kind of right. I think it will have disastrous impact on the global economy.
and of course, on voters here.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert at all in anything that's happening in the worldwide economy. I don't have any experience in it, but I'll just put in context that the gilt sell-off has had its worst day since Kwasi Kwarteng was Chancellor. So it's definitely
Thank you for reminding me.
in bad area.
And that could get worse. I mean, you know, we're just at the beginning of this conflict. I think the inflation impact will have an impact on interest rates. And also the cost of living. The government will have to probably do a bailout. That was one of the contexts of our budget, was that we'd done this energy bailout, which was costed at tens of billions. In the end, the gas price came down. But all of these things mean that the government will be under huge pressure in a world where they're on 19% in the polls.
But do you think that Starmer will be blamed for that if and when it happens, the prices skyrocket, even though he did try to, you know, pull away from the war?
This is the problem of being a prime minister. You get blamed for everything. Right? Everyone gets into that job feeling at least a bit popular, and everyone leaves that job as a failure. It doesn't matter whether they did well or did badly in office. You're a failure because you go because your party's thrown you out or the country's thrown you out. And part of the job is that the buck stops there and you get all the breakbacks, and it's always your fault. So even though I think most of us would see if the cost of living went up and prices went up, it would be Trump's fault.
We had the same thing.
Here, well, no, because that wasn't Donald Trump's fault. That was Liz Truss's fault.
No. The big context of that was the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was what was driving public expenditure, which was driving inflation. That was what was lockdown, and then there was huge demand for energy that drove up the prices, and then the Putin. There are all these external shocks. I'm not saying that we should feel sorry for politicians. I'm just saying that always happens.
The question
that always
was
happens.
What's going to happen to Starmer next, and whatever the blame. This may well be Trump's war, Trump's problem, Trump's crisis. He's created for the whole world, but Starmer will have to pay the price.
Let's call a spade a spade. I mean, Starmer was in trouble way before this war. Way before this war. I mean, there were so many misjudgments, there were so many U-turns. There's been leadership speculation for months. So the idea that, you know, Trump is what's caused, you know, his demise, if that's what happens, is not true.
Let me just bring in another story from page 2 of the Times. More bad news for Keir Starmer. Mauritius is threatening to sue Britain over the Chagos Islands deal in a further blow to Keir Starmer. Susie.
Well, as they should. It was never anything to do with them blimmin' anywhere else. I mean, if our nation says the people of the Falkland Islands have a right to self-determination, if our nation says people of Ukraine have a right to self-determination, then the people of the Chagos Islands have a right to self-determination. Mauritius was the only place historically which ever had any kind of administrative control over the Chagos Islands.
So what are you saying? That we should just hand them back?
No, I think the people of the Chagos Islands should be able to rent it to the Americans and make billions out of it if they want to. I don't think that's our job, because we kicked them off the island absolutely illegally, and it's their home.
Where I agree with you is that the Chagosians should have a say, because as Susie says, all the other countries, we say, you know, there's got to be determination, there's got to be a democratic vote. And in this instance, there hasn't been any. And we've just slavishly followed an advisory guidance from an international court.
OK. Let's bring, as a final story, some light relief, something completely different. The Eurovision entry, the UK entry, presumably done to curry favour with the Eurovision or German audience. I think we can actually listen to a bit of it. Bobbing along there.
That would win if he did it in a tutu.
Really? It wasn't strange enough for you?
A boy suit looking a bit tough. Not going to work, mate. You haven't read the memo. I mean, the song's great, the lyrics marvellous. They're going to go for that in all the Europop discos, but wrong outfit.
You're absolutely
wrong
kidding.
outfit.
I thought it was rubbish. I thought it was really, really bad. Well, going eins, zwei, drei, do you think a whole bunch of Germans and Austrians are going to vote for that?
I think that's going to take the lid off the arena, is what I think. And if he actually did it in the style of some of the brilliant winners that we've had before, whether it's Someone in Drag, whether it's something like that great Israeli artist whose name I can't remember now. I'm not your toy. Anything like this, it would be...
You're a fan, aren't you?
Amazing. If you do it right, if you get the Eurovision beat right, and the song's right, he's not.
Well, we get you back on the evening of Eurovision and we can find out how well he does. Now, coming up, it's the sport, how Liverpool secured a place in the quarterfinals of this season's FA Cup.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh?
Let's go. Watch, wait. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away. Thank you very much. Okay, but
Listen,
I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. We're trying to see as much as we can.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Let's get the latest sport now from Josh at Sky Sports News.
Good afternoon. I'm sure all the Arsenal fans would want to know how much ammunition are you going to give Arsene Wenger to fire?
It'll be enough. Arsene wanted certain players to come in, and meanwhile he wasn't really the manager yet.
I went a few times to watch Kane play, and I asked after the game, who is this guy?
Patrick was top of his list.
He was telling me that he was on his way to Arsenal, and I said, listen, you're going anywhere, I'll follow you.
He was going to join Ajax, and in fact I think Bayern Munich were also in for him at the time.
I spent 3 days in Amsterdam.
So we had hijack it.
His agents called me, tell him to take the plane to fly to London.
We were breaking the mould. We had to rely on Arsene's judgment.
Adding a continental touch to Arsenal's never say die style is what Wenger is promising.
Quand je suis venu, je veux dire, il y a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un grand club. Je veux dire, ils ont un public qui est fabuleux.
I believe he has a great future. At the time, English players were dominant. It was a risk, yes, when we bought foreign players.
He knew what I was missing to go to the top.
We weren't used to this at Arsenal. We were very British. It was like, who are all these French guys?
Steve Bold turned around with his tray full of beers. I just remember Patrick Facegood square.
He was special. How have AC Milan got rid of him?
Quite literally unbeatable.
Captain of the Invincibles.
You don't get a better legacy than that.
It was one of the greatest bargains in the history of Premier League transfers. Patrick Vieira, £3.5 million.
He should have a statue, in my opinion.
Everybody realised that guy could change the destiny of Arsenal Football Club.
The rest is history.
Cannes at the time had one of the best academies in the country. I mean, Zidane is obviously the other outstanding one to come out of there. And for him to start at 17, for a team like Cannes, who at that time was playing top 7, top 8 in France, and yet he was the best player on that team, pretty much. For us, in France, he was very, very highly rated.
I was coaching Monaco, and it was an end-of-season game. We played a kind of League Cup at the end of the season. He played with Cannes, and I asked after the game, who is this guy? He won the challenges, he dominated the midfield. After the game, I said to my assistant, I've seen a great player today.
He was tall, he was strong, he was so determined, he was hard on people, but he could move the ball so well. He had everything. There was no doubt he was destined for great things.
I went a few times to watch Cannes play. He had that presence, that he was quite complete player defensively and offensively. It was always difficult to buy the players from Cannes to Monaco. And I thought I would try to get him to come to Monaco.
He was the next big thing. That's why AC Milan, who had a long history of obviously French players within their squad, signed him so young.
He moved straight away to Milan, so that was the level above.
And time now to take a quick look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, after the early spring warmth and sunshine, the weekend will be cooler and cloudier with rain at times. It's a cloudy and damp picture for much of England and Wales, first thing, with drizzly rain and some mist and fog. Elsewhere, it's a cold and frosty start under clear skies, away from the brisk winds in the far northwest. Overall, Saturday should be mainly dry.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
And we will be back with much more discussion about the war in Iran and looking again at the front pages. Stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Tonight on The Wrap, Donald Trump demands Iran's unconditional surrender. The US president talks down the prospect of peace negotiations, but vows to rebuild Iran bigger and stronger than ever before as the White House gives its timeline for the war in the Middle East. We'll have analysis from our data and forensics team, mapping every known strike on Iran, and ask what the targets tell us about the US-Israeli strategy. And as a US heavy bomber lands in Gloucestershire, politicians turn on each other over what the country should be doing in support of the war and the role of the opposition in times of national crisis. Well, we discuss the day's biggest stories with the investigative journalist Susie Boniface and the former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers, including Donald Trump's demands on the Iranian regime. Good evening, and Susie and Kwasi, welcome to you both. What began with the assassination of Iran's supreme leader almost a week ago has widened into a regional conflict which could reshape the Middle East. Today, Donald Trump ruled out peace talks with Iran, saying he would rebuild the country bigger and better than ever before, but only after the unconditional surrender of the current regime. And after what has been a bruising week for the special relationship, tonight we're going to hear further claims that the UK was not prepared and ignored warnings from its own ambassador in Israel. Susie and Kwasi, you should have thoughts on that. We'll be hearing from them in just a moment. But first, our international correspondent Diana Magnay reports.
As America and Israel continue their aerial assault on Iran, the Shia faithful gathered for Friday prayers outside the Grand Mosque in Tehran. A huge turnout, some draped in the regime flag. Their late leader's message of death to America still ringing out in these streets loud and clear.
We will not give up this revolution. We will not give up the blood for our leader. Every single son of Iran is ready to fight America and Israel until victory, God willing.
In the skies above, Israeli warplanes in flight over Iran to strike what the pilot here calls targets of historic consequence. Taken out overnight by 50 Israeli jets, Ali Khamenei's underground military bunker, hidden deep beneath a residential area which the IDF said they'd ordered an evacuation of ahead of that strike. The Pentagon releasing video of further hits on Iranian targets, including this on an Iranian drone carrier. The real-life battle through the US crosshairs. This war is having terrible real-life consequences on multiple fronts across the Middle East. Hundreds of thousands displaced now in Lebanon and more than 200 killed. Huge plumes of smoke on the Beirut skyline as Israel continues to hammer Hezbollah targets. And Hezbollah hits back. 8 Israeli soldiers wounded, including the son of Israel's far-right finance minister, who not 24 hours earlier had said that parts of Beirut would soon look like Gaza.
We are striking the enemy, both at its leadership, its oppressive regime, and at various targets, including in Lebanon. First, I would like to extend my best wishes for a full and speedy recovery to our wounded, including the son of our friend, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, and I want our soldiers and wounded to know the entire nation stands behind you.
Their ballistic missile capabilities still the pride of Iranian state TV, with intercepts this Friday over Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And a large fire at a US Kuwaiti airbase caused by Iranian ordnance. But in Israel, the country's formidable aerial defense is doing what it's meant to do, and the pace of incoming fire has dropped off noticeably. It may be that Iran is running out of missiles. It may be that its strategy for now is to focus on the Gulf countries and that the worst is yet to come, as they keep saying. But I think for the Israeli security establishment, if this is to be a long war, it's crucial to get the people behind them. And for that, they need them to feel that life is as normal as it can be. The US president said on Truth Social there would be no deal with Iran except for unconditional surrender and the selection of what he said was a great and acceptable leader. as the immense combined force of American and Israeli air power continued in its efforts to bomb the Islamic Republic into submission. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Let's get the thoughts of Susie and Kwasi. Susie, if I can start with you. The usual bombastic language from Donald Trump, unconditional surrender. But, we're a week into this war. The Ayatollah was killed almost a week ago on Saturday. And, it doesn't look like it's going to be over anytime soon.
No, we've had Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesman, talking about maybe 4 to 6 weeks, which doesn't sound quite realistic either. It seems that there's a lot of possibilities of things getting horrifically worse in lots of different directions if something happens. But what's interesting, I think, to ask ourselves is what would the end game actually look like for Donald Trump? Because he talks about unconditional surrender. Nah. What he wants is a pliant Iran that will sell him oil but not Russia, and which will sort of make him look good but also stable, keep that area stable. Like with Venezuela, he doesn't want to have a total regime change and bring in an opposition that might not be friendly to him. Yeah. And in Iran, what could that be? Maybe having an Islamic regime still there, but maybe just without the Ayatollah on the top. Would that be possible?
Kwasi, before coming to you, I just want to say, because the White House actually issued a statement on their social media channels outlining their objectives. So 4 of them: to destroy the regime's missiles, to annihilate the Navy, ensure that the proxies can no longer destabilize the region and the world, and obviously ensure that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. So at least they've outlined those objectives.
Yeah, but
regime change, I mean, it depends what will happen, but it has been outlined.
I think Susie makes a fair point, because let's say, for the sake of argument, they had unconditional surrender. They put their hand. Then what are the Americans going to do? Are they going to try them like they did at Nuremberg after the Second World War? Are they going to try and establish a democracy? I mean, Trump has said he doesn't really care much for having a democracy. He can work with religious leaders. But it's very unclear what the end game is. And that's why I think there's a lot of scepticism in Britain about the conflict, because, what are we doing this for? What does it look like if we achieve success?
And actually, I understand that Donald Trump is speaking at the White House now, so let's take a quick listen to what he's saying.
In the world. Right, that's right. There's a lot. We're doing by the way, in Iran, we're doing very well. Somebody said, how would you score it from 0 to 10? I said, I'd give it a 12 to a 15. Their army is gone. They're just about, look, their navy is gone. Their communications are gone. Their leaders are gone. 2 sets of their leaders are gone. They're down to their 3rd set. Their air force is wiped out entirely. Think of it. They have 32 ships. All 32 are at the bottom of the ocean. Other than that, they're doing very well, Coach. Very well.
Donald Trump there, so scoring himself, what was it, 12 to 15 out of 10, saying the army's gone, navy's gone, leaders gone. None of that strictly true, of course. There's a whole hierarchy there. But I guess that's the kind of language that we expect from Trump, and it's hard to understand exactly how things are going.
So look, he's always going to declare victory. Whatever happens, he's going to say it was an outstanding success, and that, America is now top of its game, and the enemies have been, scattered to the dust. The reality is, as Susie has mentioned, there are 150,000 troops in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They're a military, essentially. There are a whole host of minor clerics, ayatollahs. This regime has been embedded for 47 years, and I'm not sure that they're just going to, fold, declare, surrender, and then let Trump do whatever he wants. I think the danger is that they'll fight and they'll want to bed themselves in.
I can remember when he said he'd obliterated the nuclear weapon capabilities.
Yeah, it was only a year ago.
About a year ago. The president of FIFA must be feeling like a right twit now.
Let's look at another angle so that maybe we can try and get a clearer idea of what the aims might be, both of the US and, of course, Israel. So thousands of bombs have been dropped on Iran since this war began on Saturday morning. But what are the US and Israel trying to achieve? And do they even want the same thing? Our data and forensic correspondent Tom Cheshire has been taking a look at what we can learn from the nature of the strikes so far. Let's look.
What is the point of this war? What's the aim? We've heard all sorts of different goals from Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, all the way down the chain of command. But the targets that the US and Israel are hitting tell their own story. And we found one type of target that could be a pretty big clue to the strategy behind the strikes. This is what we're talking about, a campaign of airstrikes that is only intensifying. These are some of the latest attacks in the northwest targeting military positions, border posts, and police stations. Remember those, they are crucial to this. And these are all the sites in Iran that have been hit, as mapped by the Institute for the Study of War and Sky's Data and Forensics team. We've broken them down into different categories: military, political, unknown, civilian, police, infrastructure, and nuclear. In total, over 360 sites have been hit. The Israeli military says it's dropped more than 5,000 bombs. The US says it's hit more than 2,000 targets. And that includes massive strikes, like this one on the very first day on the former Supreme Leader's compound, which killed Ayatollah Khamenei and scores of other senior leaders, this huge plume of smoke. There have been others, an office of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard called the IRGC, the force that plays a crucial role in supporting and enforcing the Iranian regime. Or this hospital, which sustained damage when the Iranian state broadcaster nearby was hit. Here we can see babies in incubators being evacuated in those scenes of that apparently accidental damage. But Sky's Data and Forensics team has also verified and mapped strikes in one type of target in particular: police stations and other law enforcement, like border guards. In total, we verified airstrikes on 45 police buildings across Iran. Now, this isn't just happening here in Tehran, it's also over here in the northwest Kurdistan province, the home of Iran's Kurdish minority. That is really important. We'll come back over here. But we'll start with Tehran. These are all the police stations that have been hit. This is what it looks like. This was police station 104 in Abbas Abad. This is what it was like before the strike. And then we can see the aftermath. Here you can see it has been completely destroyed. Now, if you look at the White House's official war aims, which took a few days to publish, they've defined them here on social media. Destroy the Iranian regime's missiles, annihilate their navy, ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the world, ensure Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. You might notice there is one thing missing from this list, and that is regime change. Israel, though, has been less coy. This is Benjamin Netanyahu on social media saying, "Our joint action will create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. The time has come for all parts of the Iranian people to cast off the yoke of tyranny and bring about a free and peace-seeking Iran." So how do police stations fit into that?
I think we know what the aims of this war. It's clearer from when Israel talks about it. It changes, you know, in Washington, but all in all, it's about regime change. Whether the regime change itself will be done by Israel or the Iranians, time will tell. And one of the ways to instigate and then maybe accelerate this is by dismantling the police and the security forces.
And although we've seen this pattern in different parts of the country, we talked about Tehran, it's in the Kurdish part of Iran, back here in the northwest, where it's really clear and it's really important. This is Sanandaj in that region. We've mapped strikes in the city. Again, police stations have been high on the priority list. This is police station 15 in Sanandaj after a recent strike. You can see this is being targeted. Again, this isn't military infrastructure. This is a police station that appears to have been hit. And this is a region where there are forces that oppose the Iranian regime and are more likely to be loyal to the US and Israel in case of an uprising. So regime change may not be an official US war aim, but Israel wants it, and the American government has said it wouldn't be upset if it happened. And by targeting police stations, which our analysis suggests is a specific strategy, they're creating the conditions for that to happen.
And Kwasi and Susie, and fascinating there how the targeting of police stations actually could sort of show you what the actual aim is, at least for Israel. So it could be that the US and Israel went into this with different aims.
Yeah, I think the Israeli aims are much clearer, and they've explicitly said, we want regime change. Now, I think the White House is saying less, because President Trump doesn't want to look like an idiot. So if he says, I want to do regime change, and for whatever reason that doesn't come about, he will have failed. So he set slightly more ambiguous targets so that he can do what he always does and declare victory and say it was a great success and give himself 13 out of 10 or whatever, when it's over.
Yeah, he's clearly trying to bomb a path to Tehran for the Kurds, who are the only kind of armed opposition that is in the area. But, what's interesting is before the war, the former president, quite moderate, quite pragmatic man, Hassan Rouhani, who was in power until 2021, he had been sort of pushed out by the regime, and it was reported that they were monitoring his phone because they believed he was talking to the Americans. And he's one of the few possible successors who hasn't actually been killed yet. Sure. So if you want to decide who may be the next Ayatollah because you've been chosen by God, the best qualification would be, well, you're not dead yet. So
or the sons of the two previous Ayatollahs are also sort of...
They're in the running.
Yeah, they
but
are.
I think,
Until they get bombed.
But clearly, I mean, you can see why the regime is paranoid, because clearly, the Israeli and American intelligence, they knew everything. Mm. So they must have had assets, as the intelligence people call them, on the ground. And those people could have been quite high up in the regime. I mean, that's the worry.
Yeah, but they've clearly had access to traffic cameras. They've known exactly where every single police station is in an anonymous office block.
Right.
So they've had intelligence to know that when families get disappeared, when bodies get turned up on the doorsteps with a bullet in the back of the head, that it's the police station down the road that's done it. And that has gone back.
And they knew when these important meetings took place, so that they could wipe out lots of the leaders. They knew the timings of all of that.
Let me bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. John, I think we're hearing now that a US heavy bomber has landed at RAF Fairford.
At least one, yes. We saw one arrive at 5:40 p.m. this evening, and we think more are on the way, may well have landed now. Enormous, great bomber. And the reason that they're going to Fairford is because it's such a big airfield. It's got a 2-mile runway. I think it's the biggest in Europe, I think. And Fairford was actually, it's in Gloucestershire. It was actually built in 1944 for troop transporters to take British troops to D-Day landings in Normandy. It was used by B-52 bombers, by the Americans in the Iraq War, and so on. And so that's why they're going there. It's huge, and obviously it's a big turning point, really, because it follows the decision by the Prime Minister on Sunday night to change his mind. Not a U-turn, according to Number 10. Different request is what they said at the time. But that is obviously a big development. Of course, the other developments we've seen in the last, last few days, of course, is the farce, if you like, of this ship, HMS Dragon, sitting in Portsmouth, and Kemi Badenoch is referring to this in a speech she's making tomorrow. She is going to really turn up the heat. She's going to launch her strongest attack yet on Sir Keir Starmer over the Iran war, and she's going to be talking about, as she puts it, today's Labour Party is nothing like the patriotic Labour Party of yesteryear, while the rest of the world rearms, they're playing student politics. In her speech, she will say, "I never thought I would see the day when Britain's allies felt they could not rely on us. This week, they have described us as weak." She says they've accused us of deserting them, going missing in action, talks about Britain refusing to send reinforcements and so on. And then she talks about ships. The US, Greece and France have all sent ships. Ours is stuck in Portsmouth Harbour. This is a speech she's going to deliver at the Conservative Spring Conference in Harrogate, Saturday morning. PM sitting on the fence, playing student politics. And she mentions then the famous Nye Bevan speech, 1957 Labour Party conference. Nye Bevan warned about Britain not having a nuclear deterrent. It's the UK... It's described it as the UK being sent naked into the conference chamber. Well, as you can imagine, Labour have hit back. Al Carnes, the Armed Forces Minister, former Royal Marine, hard man, tough guy, talked as a potential Labour leader, perhaps, despite the fact he's only been in Parliament about 18 months. He says trying to score cheap political points off the back of a serious security situation is deeply irresponsible. This situation is above politics and requires calm, collective decision-making, not hyperbole and sound bites. Who'd have thought it? Politicians, hyperbole and sound bites, eh?
It's shocking. Susie, is it scoring cheap political points?
Oh, my God. Look, if
is that a yes or a no?
If the Conservative Party in recent years has been for anything, it's to say, well, Europe can go and do its thing. We don't have to join in with them. It's been about fighting for the sovereignty of Parliament and our right to say, well, go our own way and not have to toe the line with the Americans. So half of what she just said doesn't make any sense. And what Nye Bevan was talking about in 1957 was not atomic weapons. It was thermonuclear hydrogen bombs. the biggest, nastiest things we've ever fired, which we fired within 12 months of that.
Yeah, but he was right.
Hang on a moment, Kwasi, I'm making a point.
He was right.
And within moments of Nye Bevan making that speech, within weeks and months of that, 40,000 British troops and Commonwealth troops were deliberately exposed to radiation in experiments which they are still feeling the effects of today. And 150,000 families in this country are still feeling the effects of the birth defects that come out as a result of that. That's one of the things that I investigate for the Mirror. So, although, you know, the idea of, yes, we needed the nuclear deterrent and all that kind of thing, there is a huge personal human cost to going to fight a massive
We're not here
war.
to talk about the nuclear deterrent. What we are here to discuss is what's happening today. And I think Kemi Badenoch is absolutely right. They are playing student politics. They're looking to their domestic, fragmenting left-wing coalition. He doesn't want to be Tony Blair. He probably actually believes it. He doesn't want to get involved in the Middle East. But the problem with that is that our key ally, the United States, whether you love or loathe Donald Trump, the US is a key ally, is saying that we're unreliable allies. And it's not just the Americans. I mean, the Israelis and other nations have said...
Trump's quite unreliable.
So Badenoch... Well, you can't... Two wrongs don't make a right. You can't say, well, we're unreliable, but that's OK because he's unreliable.
I think he has been quite staid and steady and not being excitable, which is the opposite of Trump.
Kemi is right to say the perception abroad is that we're weak.
I mean, it's interesting because there's a poll in one of the papers showing that actually the public is not on the side of joining with...
The public are standing... I think Keir's doing the right thing for once.
The public are rightly sceptical about what the American intention is. Now, and I think that they have... You know, I'm not a Tory leader, but as far as Kemi's concerned...
Shame.
Thank you so much. But as far as Kemi is concerned, that alliance is really important. And as leader of the opposition, she's saying, you know, we've got to support our allies. It's not just about the Americans. I mean, you know, the Greeks, the French offered to help us in Cyprus and said, you know, come on, we can send our ship there. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing. And it's not just about the Americans. All sorts of allies are saying, where are you?
But just, was it a month ago in Davos when the US was about to invade Greenland, we were all talking about how actually the NATO alliance doesn't really exist anymore, the special relationship or the Western alliance, and now the whole thing seems to have flipped around?
Well, it hasn't. I mean, what we're finding is that, and Trump is exercising power, unilateral power, that America is a dominant power on the world stage. We all knew that. But Trump is kind of slightly unembarrassed and unabashed about using power.
But Barbara's right. You point out that, you know, the thing with Greenland is that it was telegraphed well in advance and everyone went, oh, that would be bad, don't do that, and acted to stop the toddler getting out of control. With Iran, you have an entirely different situation. Greenland's a safe, happy, peaceful country and it's not a problem. Iran is a slightly more complex situation, but it wasn't telegraphed far enough in advance for enough people to try to be stopping it. Everyone was dealing with diplomacy and thinking that's where they were going. And then Trump has just flipped the board along with Netanyahu and decided, no, we're going to do this now. And everyone is rushing
to
keep up with it.
I think, and the diplomat said the same thing. I think there were clear indications that they were going to do something. I mean, there was
but for weeks, not for, you know,
I mean, last summer, the Israeli took out tons of the leaders in Iran. And Trump has been essentially beating the war drum for weeks, as you say, and that should have given us enough time to prepare. What went wrong, I think, for the PM was that, you know, and we read stories about Ed Miliband was the one to say, don't back Donald Trump. And at the beginning, the Prime Minister said, OK, we're not going to help. We're not going to use, you can't use our bases to launch an attack on Iran. And then 4 days later, he said the opposite. And President Trump was hang on a second, you're completely unreliable.
Yeah, but what happened in those 4 days was that British citizens came under fire. So, of course, he had to change his mind. What's wrong with that?
This is the David Lammy...
Is that not the best thing to do?
No. This is the David Lammy nonsense, dare I say, of saying there's defensive bombing and offensive bombing. You know, if you're at the bottom, you know, the end of that, it doesn't make any difference whether it's defensive bombing or offensive bombing.
No, but you'd want your Prime Minister to change his mind, wouldn't you?
It's completely absurd. We're helping them. They're using our bases to bomb Iran, and we came to that decision very late.
OK, just going to have to move on from that. I'm sure we'll be discussing that at length in the future. Now, 3 former US presidents lead tributes at a memorial service for Jesse Jackson. That's coming up.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
3 former U.S. presidents have led the tributes at a memorial service for Jesse Jackson. 10,000 people attended the ceremony in Chicago, where Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Joe Biden honored the civil rights activist who died last month. Our U.S. correspondent David Blevins reports.
I was born by the river.
The civil rights anthem for the man who carried the dream, Jesse Jackson, a towering figure in modern American history, honoured by the music and the memories.
This is how he would start. I am somebody. I am somebody.
The House of Hope in Chicago had never seen anything quite like it. 3 former presidents in attendance, Clinton, Biden and Obama. The South Side's most famous son, recalling his first encounter with Jesse Jackson.
The message he sent to a 22-year-old child of a single mother was that maybe there wasn't any place, any room where we didn't belong.
And the former president had strong words about the current administration.
Each day we're told by those in high office to fear each other and to turn on each other. But this man, Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, inspires us to take a harder path.
An aide to Martin Luther King Jr., Jesse Jackson witnessed his assassination, then stepped onto the stage himself, redefining the fight for racial equality, eventually becoming the first black man to run for president.
It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
One by one, they eulogized a political icon with one recurring echo.
He kept hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
Together, they celebrated his legacy.
You ask me how I know that God is real.
A refusal to accept segregation, a state funeral in all but name for the boy who really did become somebody. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Kwasi, not only was that memorial marking the incredible legacy of Jesse Jackson, but it does so at a very particular moment in American history.
Yes, I mean, I think that what Jesse Jackson represented was keep hope alive. Obviously, Obama lent into that. And now you've got a very polarized America. And, you know, President Trump doesn't talk about hope. He doesn't talk about any of that. He would think that's sort of airy-fairy nonsense. And he's just looking at real power, you know, American dominance and make America great again. So it's a very different vibe. And I think Jesse Jackson almost belongs to a different era, you know, civil rights, the horrors of segregation and racism. He fought against that. And it was very much an optimistic message. And today, there's a kind of backlash against what is described as the woke agenda. People think a lot of that progressive stuff has gone too far, to ridiculous lengths. And it's a different time. And Jesse Jackson really looks back 30, 40 years to a different era.
But so what do you think his legacy is today?
Look, I think he was an inspiration, certainly for the Democratic Party, for African Americans, many people in that, you know, in the Deep South who was coming out of racism and segregation, and he represented a huge step forward. But I think today's politics in the US is completely different. And in a way, looking at that video, you saw it was like a look into the past. It was almost a different era.
Susie, what did you make of it?
I think I agree that America is very different now, but you know, it's currently a country which is racially profiling its own citizens, which is detaining its own citizens without proper legal process and deporting people, sometimes its own citizens again, holding children in detention and so on, because of the colour of their skin.
But the deportations, I mean, the deportations are actually quite popular. I mean, that's the one bit of the Trump agenda that people of all different creeds and colours are actually getting behind.
Not quite, I don't think. And I think what Obama showed there is that actually you can get through a difficult period like that, and there is sometimes, and what Jesse Jackson was talking about always was that there was going to be a better place at some point. And Jesse Jackson, a man who stood next to Martin Luther King when he was murdered by a government agent, effectively, got to see the first black president of the United States sworn in. He was sitting there on the inauguration platform.
Yeah, look,
and I think that is something that we need to bear in mind. That journey is possible, and we're undergoing a similar process now, and we can be in that same place again.
Okay. Time now to take a quick look at the papers, the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Well, US President Donald Trump's demand for Iran's unconditional surrender makes the front page of The Guardian. That story summed up in a three-word headline by The Times: surrender warns Trump. Meanwhile, The Telegraph reports on how Russia is helping Iran strike US military targets in the Middle East. The Financial Times carries a warning from Qatar's energy minister, who says that war in the Middle East could bring down the economies of the world, with the possibility of all Gulf energy exporters shutting production within days. A domestic angle on the front of the Eye, which says only 1 in 5 people in the UK support Britain joining the war with Iran. Elsewhere, the Mail reports on the arrest of 4 men in London who were detained on suspicion of spying on the Jewish community for Iran. The Mirror leads on claims about Donald Trump in the Epstein files, which have been categorically denied by the White House. Let's go to The Express, which says the Queen wants children to put down their phones and pick up a book. Oasis legend Noel Gallagher has split from his girlfriend. That's according to The Times. And The Star leads on the UK's 2026 Eurovision entry. I'm going to try to pronounce this right. Eins, zwei, drei, which has a chorus partially sung in German. We're not quite sure why. We'll see how well it does when the Eurovision actually happens in a few weeks. OK, let's take a closer look at some of those stories. Why don't we start with the Eye, page 15, a Dubai-related story. Why influencers gushing posts about safety in Dubai that we have seen on social media platforms over the past few days may actually stem from fear of prosecution. What's this about?
Wait, because there is a law in Dubai against bringing the government into disrepute and talking the country down and so on. You can go to jail. So if you are earning lots of money for a very brief period of your life, perhaps as an influencer, the period in which you are young and pretty and can wear a tan well, then you want to go to Dubai because then you're saving all your tax and not getting taxed and all this stuff. And topping up your tan while you're there. But the cost of that is you have to be nice to your hosts. And if you are not nice about your hosts in every possible way, because there is no freedom of speech in that country, and there are some terrible human rights issues as well, that you get thrown out. And so they're saying, oh, my God, it's awful. There are things falling down from the sky, but I'm so safe. At least no one's nicking my Rolex. And, you know, a quick selfie while they're doing it. It's a bit pathetic. Well,
I mean, you make light of that fact, but, the fact is on the streets of London, people are nicking Rolexes. So that's the point they're making.
There's no thing falling out of the sky.
No, so that's their...
And you can criticise
We're nowhere near Iran.
You can. So, but that's the point they're making. And I think that... But I think you're right. I mean, I think they've got to try and max out their earning potential, and that's what they're doing.
Well, they're maxing their tax avoidance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Counting the days, literally. Times, page 4. Is Streeting making good on his promise to fix the NHS? Quasi?
Well, time will tell. I mean, as a former cabinet minister, I'm struck by the fact that only 6 weeks ago he was kind of flirting with trying to topple the Prime Minister. And now I think he's been told to stick to his lane. So he's now going out and writing articles about the NHS as he's the health secretary. So he's really kind of rowing back from all of this business. I mean, he was at one point commenting on everything the government was doing.
Right, but
and now he's rowing back and he's in his lane like a whipped dog, you know, sort of scurrying back. I'm not that he should do that, but that's what he's doing. And it's just striking to me that that's what's happened.
Well, one thing that is going well, and whether it's Wes Streeting or someone in his department, it's going very well. As someone who's been in and out of hospitals recently with loved ones, the process and the practice of having more weekend appointments and scans and outpatient checks is really clearing the backlog. And from personal experience, being in the hospital at the weekend is a better experience, and there is just the same level of care. In fact, it's slightly less frenetic, so you get more care. And I haven't noticed anything poor about it. It's been very quick in and out, and it goes well. And whoever's come up with that idea it should have been there all along. You should always have had a 24/7 NHS where all of those things work.
Jeremy Hunt was trying to do that when he was health secretary, 10 years ago.
But he didn't.
OK. We're going to take a look at more of the day's stories or the front pages after this short break.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
You're watching The Wrap. We're having a quick look through some of tomorrow's papers. If we look at the I, page 8, Susie, this to you. Tactical voting could block Farage's potential path to Downing Street.
Yeah, I think one of the things, although the polling obviously shows a lot of support for reform and has done for a long time, one of the things it doesn't really show is how that plays out in reality on the day of the poll and in different constituencies in different places. And I think there will be a degree of distaste, not just for Farage, who's quite a common and a figure we're used to in politics now, but for some of the people around him and for some of their policies. I think there'll be enough distaste and just I think also that there's inexperience there and perhaps potential a bit Trumpism as well, that actually there'll be a lot of people who normally would not vote for one thing, who go, do you know what, I'm going to vote for those guys this time because anyone but that. And there'll be a lot of tactical voting that may well...
There always is tactical voting. I mean, the last election, everyone wanted to get lots of people want to get the Tories out, so they tactically voted, and it led to a big defeat.
Yeah, but that's like saying every time no one votes for who you want to be, it's tactical.
Yeah, but
that's not how it works.
But no, it is. I mean, it's documented, and I think this time there'll be a stop Farage vote. There'll also be a let's get Labour out vote. I mean, that's what look at the Greens. You know, I mean, that's people want the government to lose.
Let's rattle through and look at some of the other stories. Page 5 of the Eye. This is the Paralympics. The opening ceremony has happened. Britain and other nations boycotted it because of Russian and Belarusian athletes being permitted to compete under their own flags as opposed to the Winter Olympics when that wasn't allowed. Is there a point to boycotting these ceremonies, do you think, Susie?
I don't think not the opening ceremony. I think it's the games that you would want to boycott if you're going to make a proper point. But I would like to just say that the Paralympic Games I always find immensely more impressive than the Olympics. Yes, it's great if someone can go and be Olympian and do these wonderful things, but to do all those wonderful things when you don't have any legs or when you have some kind of something different about you,
especially
you
winter sports, I have to say.
In winter sports, if you can, throw yourself down on a skeleton bob is scary enough and brilliant enough as an Olympian. But if you're doing it when you've got a head injury already or something like that, then, I mean, I'm just more impressed at those guys. And obviously, Belarus and Russia got banned and they managed to, win their appeal against the ban, and so they're in the Games.
For the Paralympics, but not the Olympics. So there's
this... Because they did the appeal. I mean, look, I'm very sceptical about mixing sport with politics. Okay. I mean, I understand the gesture, but I think you're right. I mean, I think they were going to make the gesture. They shouldn't have gone there. I mean, we did that in 1980, with the Olympics in Moscow, in Russia. And we didn't go because of the Afghanistan invasion.
We're going to have to almost leave it there, but Susie, you've got 10 seconds to tell me about stamps, because I know you care about stamps, but
so
10
the most
seconds.
important story in here is about the Royal Mail. Says the price for first-class stamps going up to £1.80, and I sat here and thought, who won't pay £2 per send them in a letter? What you can do, dear viewer, is when politicians send you nasty letters through the post that you haven't asked for, and they've got a prepaid envelope fill it full of gravel and rocks.
I realised...
Post it back to them.
Sorry, forgive me.
They have to pay for it.
So the 80 Olympics, America boycotted. I was a bit confused, because I remember Alan Wells winning the 100 metres or whatever, and he was British, and that never happened, and it was the Americans who boycotted.
Okay.
But post rocks back to politicians.
All right. Now, we have to leave it there. Kwasi, Susie, thank you both so much for joining us on The Wrap, and have a great weekend. Now, coming up in all the sport, we'll tell you how Liverpool secured a place in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup.
program is delivered by DHL, the official logistics partner of VSL.
Welcome to the DHL Sports Hub on Sky News. Coming up, Jack Draper previews his title defence at Indian Wells as he continues his tennis comeback after 6 months out with an arm injury. And having been confirmed as Europe's captain for a third successive Ryder Cup, double-winning skipper Luke Donald explains why he's staying on for next year's tournament in Ireland. But we start with Formula One and McLaren's Lando Norris, who's preparing to race as world champion for the first time on Sunday as the 2026 season gets underway in Australia. He's been speaking at a promotional event with his team's global payments partner Airwallex and says the most difficult moments in last year's title win are what have him ready to defend it now. A warning of some flashing images coming up in these pictures.
Lando Norris!
He's introduced these days like a champion boxer. Can Lando Norris be king of the ring again this year? His a title fight over 24 hard rounds.
You know, there's certainly moments, key moments last year, but it was the moments that were not so good. It was the tricky moments that I learned from and improved on. It was the bad experiences which turned into a better experience after all. So. You're always learning, you know, and you're always racing against different people, overcoming new challenges, learning different things, and it's about how can you continue to improve on the things you already know, and how can you consistently try and add in the new challenges and take on new challenges at the same time.
Norris isn't the betting favourite, that's Mercedes' George Russell. There's been some good banter between them. The competitive order after testing.
Mercedes are.
Do you still see Mercedes? Oh, so you think Kimi Antonelli might edge George Russell?
You never know. Yeah. Just saying Mercedes are. Mercedes have looked very good. But it's a very long year, so I'm not getting ahead of myself. I think we still have a chance, and we'll be doing our best to fight everyone possible.
Yeah. Interestingly, today, George Russell told me, he said, who's your main threat? He said Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. Has McLaren gone a little bit under the radar? Has that been a deliberate tactic?
I don't know why everyone tries to know things so quickly. Like, why don't we just wait until the weekend, and then you'll be able to see it yourself.
This is true.
People love to just talk and, create unnecessary predictions. So, hey, we'll keep on the down low. We'll focus on ourselves.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
This program is delivered by DHL, the official logistics partner of VSL.
Welcome to the DHL Sports Hub on Sky News. Coming up, Jack Draper previews his title defence at Indian Wells as he continues his tennis comeback after 6 months out with an arm injury. And having been confirmed as Europe's captain for a third successive Ryder Cup, double-winning skipper Luke Donald explains why he's staying on for next year's tournament in Ireland. But we start with Formula One and McLaren's Lando Norris, who's preparing to race as world champion for the first time on Sunday as the 2026 day.
Improved into a better experience after all. So you're always learning, and you're always racing against different people, overcoming new challenges, learning different things. And it's about how can you continue to improve on the things you already know, and how can you consistently try and add in the new challenges and take on new challenges at the same time.
Norris isn't the betting favourite, that's Mercedes' George Russell. There's been some good banter between them. The competitive order after testing.
Mercedes are.
Do you still see Mercedes? Oh, so you think Kimi Antonelli might edge George Russell?
You never know. Yeah. Just saying Mercedes are. Mercedes have looked very good. But it's a very long year, so I'm not getting ahead of myself. I think we still have a chance, and we'll be doing our best to fight everyone possible.
Yeah. Interestingly, today, George Russell told me, he said, who's your main threat? He said Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. Has McLaren gone a little bit under the radar? Has that been a deliberate tactic?
I don't know why everyone tries to know things so quickly. Like, why don't we just wait until the weekend? Yeah. And then you'll be able to see it yourself.
This is true.
People love to just talk and create unnecessary predictions. So hey, we'll keep on the down low. We'll focus on ourselves, and we'll work as hard as we can.
Race 1 this year will be a useful form guide. Albert Park, Melbourne rewards a good engine, and engines should be the key differentiator. Against that, development in season 1 of a rule cycle will be on a steep curve. McLaren have been the upgrade kings. There'll be things in the pipeline. If you're there or thereabouts, would you be confident McLaren can maybe get the upper hand still this season and get back where you were?
Certainly, I have faith in my team. We had a lot of focus on last year. So we certainly are maybe not quite as perfectly prepared as some of the other teams, but I have just as much faith that we can catch up, and by halfway through the year we can be fighting for the wins.
Norris was appearing at a partners event in Melbourne. Air Wallex linked up with McLaren when they were still in F1's mid-pack. It's been quite a ride for both.
The one thing that we saw was that they shared the same kind of restlessness that we do. We could see that area of constant improvement in everything they were doing. Young driver lineup in Lando and Oscar, and we could clearly see they were building for the future. And that really aligned with what we were trying to do. We're talking about building the future of finance, and we're trying to align with teams that are doing a similar thing. And obviously that's now paid off with 2 Constructors' Championships and a Drivers' Championship for Lando last year.
Norris won here last year and had a car that was clearly the class of the field. That almost certainly won't be the case in 2026. But if he is there or thereabouts in the first part of the season, then surely McLaren will improve as the year goes on. Craig Sater, Sky Sports, Melbourne.
So, optimism in the long run from Norris and McLaren, but it remains to be seen how Aston Martin's car might evolve in the months ahead. Indeed, there are questions over whether they'll even be capable of finishing the race in Melbourne this weekend. Honda are their new engine supplier, but so far the car has struggled badly for performance and reliability. Vibrations have left Fernando Alonso fearing he might only be able to do 25 laps before risking permanent nerve damage in his hands, whilst Lance Stroll feels he could do just 15 laps. Here's what Alonso had to say after second practice.
It didn't feel much different, to be honest, than in Bahrain, and we didn't complete too many laps because the Honda issue in FP1 and some Honda issues as well in FP2. So we still need to catch up a little bit in the weekend program, and hopefully tomorrow we have a little bit more cleaner FP3.
Yeah, we know you're limited in terms of the battery situation. It's a big handicap for the weekend. Is it a bit of on a knife edge in terms of whether you make the Grand Prix or not? Is that fair to assume?
I mean, we are okay to do it. It's more a question for Honda if they have a stock.
Away from Australia, it's still unclear how the ongoing conflict in the Middle East will impact this year's F1 calendar. But we understand that races in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia would not be replaced if there was a need to cancel either or both. The 4th and 5th rounds of the championship are due to take place in the Gulf states next month, but they're in serious doubt following Iran's retaliation to US-Israeli airstrikes last weekend. F1 Chief Executive Stefano Domenicali says security is the top priority.
Our approach, first of all, is safety for all the relevant stakeholders of the people and also the promoter itself. We don't want to do any statement today because the things are so evolving, so changes that we have still time to make the right decision, and this decision will be taken together. But so far, we want to keep quiet, calm, and make sure that we have the right time to make the right decision, as we did in the past.
On to golf, and Luke Donald admits that he didn't expect to remain Europe's captain for their Ryder Cup defence at Adair Manor in Ireland next year. The Englishman will retain his position after leading the team to successive victories in Rome and New York, and could come up against Tiger Woods, who has been tipped to lead the United States as Keegan Bradley's replacement.
I really thought, I was done at 2 and really needed some time to enjoy this one in New York and then think about it, and I really didn't start that process till really probably a month ago. I just felt like I'd proven myself. I didn't take a lot of time after Rome to really dive back into the challenge of trying to win an away Ryder Cup in New York in a tough environment. That was really the goal, was just to do back-to-back. To have that opportunity was incredible. Obviously, after the success of New York, I felt like maybe it was time to give that opportunity to someone else. But, I think the Ryder Cup has given me so much. I think the last 4 years has been great for me. It's given me a lot of focus, a lot of purpose, and to obviously have the opportunity again to do it with the backing, obviously with the players and my family. That was ultimately what led me to decide to do it again.
Rugby Union's Six Nations continues this weekend, with England's Jamie George confident of a change in fortunes against Italy after back-to-back losses to Scotland and Ireland. Those defeats mean that Steve Borthwick's side are all but out of contention after 12 wins in a row previously.
I think you look at the 2 games in isolation. I think they're probably 2 different performances. There are some trends between the 2 that we need to